People tell me, you dodged a bullet. And I'm like, no, the bullet hit me. I just survived. I feel like it turned me into a monster. The rates of PTSD after narcissistic abuse is extraordinarily high, in some cases upward to 75%. You may sometimes have behaved monstrously, but you're not a monster. You're... Welcome to Fan Mail, a space where I answer your real questions about toxic relationships, narcissistic abuse, and the long road to healing. Thank you so much for sending in your questions. It really means a lot that you trust me with these really important issues. I got a letter from a YouTube listener who writes, Kerry, can you do an episode on survivor's guilt and PTSD in victims of abuse? I know I cannot be the only one dealing with this. People tell me, you dodged a bullet. And I'm like, no, the bullet hit me. I just survived. I feel like it turned me into a monster. The PTSD caused me to start reacting more strongly to smaller triggers and even did abusive things myself in what I felt was self-defense. So let's talk about this, because this is a common experience that abuse victims have, is that we walk away from these relationships and we hear all sorts of platitudes like, you're so strong, or, I see how well you're surviving, or you seem to come through everything. And that what they don't know is the daily struggles that we have, the 2 a.m. conversations, the triggers that we're battling, the numbness that we may be feeling in the workplace or in a conversation over a family get together when something gets brought up, or just even the sheer terror goes through our bodies when we are on social media and some image from the memories of the past pops up, or at something that we didn't know would be there around our ex or what they're doing today. So we did not dodge a bullet. And it's interesting that people say that. I know that they mean well when they say these types of things. They think that they're trying to actually bolster us and give us kudos for being a survivor. But what they don't know is that we carry wounds, that our sense of self, our actual, even down to the neural pathways, have been changed, that we feel fundamentally altered by what we've survived, that we did not walk out of these relationships unscathed. So even though they're attempting to be supportive and encouraging, often this ends up hitting wrong because it leaves survivors feeling invisible. It leaves our suffering feeling unacknowledged, and it leaves us feeling like what we experienced isn't being validated as being traumatic. And yes, most of us, it's interesting, the rates of PTSD after narcissistic abuse is extraordinarily high, in some cases upward to 75%. You have learned to tolerate a chronically unsafe environment, to have your nervous system be hypervigilant, looking for alarm, looking for a threat, so that it leaves you with overreactions to very small triggers, so that you're still, unfortunately, operating in a threat detection mode even after you leave these relationships. It leaves you continuing to feel like you're sensitive. Here you often get gaslighted in these relationships, being told that you're too much, too sensitive, that you are asking for too much, and then you get out of these relationships and you continue to feel not yourself, and you continue to see yourself react very easily to things, feeling like you're continuing to confirm these terrible things that were said about you. Because while you're in these relationships, you've learned how to survive. And just because we leave, which often elicits a new stage of abuse called post-separation abuse, would continue to have to be, unfortunately, in survival mode. So this is what you've learned to do to get through this, and it's injured you and unfortunately has affected you. What happens, though, in these relationships is there's a lot of shame. Narcissistic people who are very toxic, are individuals who don't know how to deal with all the internal stress, all the dysregulation, and also the consequences, all the consequences that their bad behaviors are causing for them. So there's a lot of shame and humiliation and anger and lack of justice in surrounding these types of individuals. And instead of dealing with it and processing it like an emotionally mature person would, they offload it. And they offload it most often into their closest intimate partners. So those of us who survived this, we became a receptacle for that person's shame, that person's rage, that person's blame and guilt and remorse and contempt and disgust, all the things that they didn't know how to process for themselves, about themselves. They offload and make you then the holder of that. And on top of it, because of the intermittent reinforcement, the trauma bonding, the attraction, the connection that we feel with these people, we often end up feeling like we can't leave, that we find ourselves kind of almost addicted to these individuals and we stay way too long. And that then in itself brings shame. So we walk out of these relationships feeling very bad about ourselves because we're a receptacle for their shame, but we also feel shame over our own behavior. And often they're very provocative people. They deliberately on purpose antagonize, causing us then to react. I mean, if you're poked enough, someone bump you, eventually you're going to stop it. And you may in that moment react intensely, maybe even abusively. So all of this wrapped together means that we have to carry uncomfortable sensations and impressions and feelings about ourselves, about who we have become in these relationships, which makes us feel uncomfortable. We don't always like ourselves. And as this listener said, sometimes she feels monstrous because of the extreme, profound shame. But I want you to know that you may sometimes have behaved monstrously, but you're not a monster. You were provoked. You survived something that was incredibly painful, incredibly provocative. You learned to make it through in something that you shouldn't have had to, in something that was extremely difficult. And your reactions have been self-protective because context matters. A cornered animal is going to bite. That doesn't make a cornered animal vicious by nature. So part of the healing means we need to deal with our survivor's guilt from all that it encompasses. So part of healing means that we need to do something with the survivor's guilt that we feel from all that we've encountered and survived, for not leaving sooner, for tolerating abusive behavior, for being in a relationship in the beginning with someone who was that unsafe, for even all the things that they did. I know I felt a lot of shame over his behavior, his choices. They were never mine. I never even had any choice about it, but I walked away feeling like somehow they reflected on me, made me look worse for being in contact with somebody like that. So surviving a relationship leaves us with lots of feelings of guilt and regret. And part of what we have to do is learn to heal from these feelings, heal from a relationship that may have even killed parts of who we used to be, and mourn those lost parts in order for us to make peace with who we're becoming. But I want you to hear this. You are becoming. This is not done. The story is not over and written. You are still making sense of what happened. You're metabolizing what you experienced in order to learn how to move into the next stage. And so this may have been part of who you were, but it's not going to be who you are becoming. So I want to leave you with some encouragement. First of all, your trauma responses are not character defects. They're evidences of what you've survived. And reactive abuse is not the same as being an abuser. And dodging the bullet doesn't erase the injury of what you survived. You have a right to name your wound. And often the guilt we feel afterwards is really a mask that we're experiencing that covers the grief that we feel for having had to learn to survive something so horrific. You may be mourning versions of yourself that had to learn how to survive an intolerable situation, an incredible experience of betrayal. But it's not who you are. It's not who you have to be in the future. And that recovery means befriending your most important, protective, vulnerable parts, not banishing them. You've learned how to be strong. You learn how to defend yourself. That's good, but integrate that. Don't exile those parts. Integrate them. Those parts of you saved you. They're not their enemy. They were trying to protect you for something dangerous. Healing comes from when you can thank them for the help that they gave you in keeping you alive in those terrible period of time, and letting them teach you and your system how to be a stronger person as you integrate them as you being now a new person who's assertive and confident. So I really appreciate, thank you so much for sending in this message. And I just really want to send you a big hug. I'm glad that you survived, but I want you to know that you are now launching into the next stage of your relationship with yourself. So thank you so much for those of you who send in your questions via fan mail. And if you would like me to answer your question on air, please send it to clients@kerrymcavoyphd.com. That's a new email address that I prefer that you would use. Clients with an S, CLIENTS at kerrymcavoyphd.com, or use the link that we put in every show note where you can leave a confidential request for something you'd like me to address on air. But I really appreciate the trust that you guys show me for this. So thank you so much for this, for the YouTube listener who sent this question to me.